Fultar over rash Gadi BioFarm Fido Talamh Beo a County Leitrim in Nuv in San Landmark Hotel. We are live here in County Leitrim for BioFarm 22, and today, right now, we are going to have a presentation from Talamh Beo. So we have Thomas O'Connor here. He's working with Talamh Beo. Thomas, tell us a bit about what Talamh Beo is and what it does.
Thank you very much, Anna. Yeah, my name is Thomas O'Connor. I'm delighted to be here on behalf of Talamh Beo, talking about our soil biodiversity and EIP project. Talamh Beo itself means living land, and our organisation is around building food sovereignty by reconnecting land, people and community. This time last year we were here to launch our EIP on soil biodiversity. It was a one-year project, and we're back here today to give a bit of a report as we finish off the project for the year. The EIP was based around building soil biodiversity and about farmer underground learning that's actually happening in the field by the farmers themselves, knowing what was happening and experiencing it. It was about getting to know the little helpers that are under our feet, the soil biology and the benefit that they can add to our farms. The EIP itself was spread across 16 different farms across 16 different water basins. Each farmer had a different farming system and a different geographical location. What that meant is that even though a lot of our systems were different, what we had in common was the soil and the biology happening underneath it. So we have a short 10-minute clip that we're going to show to give you a better overview of the EIP, and then we're going to come back and have a quick discussion with the rest of the farmers. Okay.
In 2021, Minister Hackett put out a call for one-year farm biodiversity projects, which would help farmers and land managers deliver for biodiversity.
These Agri-European Innovation Partnership projects, commonly called EIPs, are funded by the EU Recovery Funding 2014 to 2022 and administered by the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine. Talamh Beo, the name translates to living ground, is a member-led organisation representing farmers and citizens who support food sovereignty and agroecology. The operational group submitted a successful application addressing soil biodiversity. As farmers, we understand that soil is where farming starts, and that healthy soil makes for healthy, nutrient-dense plants and animals, which in turn make for healthy, nutrient-dense food.
Healthy soils provide a range of vital functions beyond producing food, fuel and fibre. They allow for water infiltration, allowing rain to filter to the water table. They mitigate both floods and droughts. They also sequester and store carbon. They are the foundation of healthy ecosystems and habitats for biodiversity. Unfortunately, ecosystems in Ireland, like those globally, are physically degraded. Soils are biologically degraded and depleted of organic matter. In places we no longer have soil, but dirt. The increasing use of chemical fertilisers over the last 50 years, combined with compaction from large-scale machinery and land management practices, has had a negative effect on soil ecology, above and below ground biodiversity, and in many cases the health of wider ecosystems, in particular water courses.
All ecosystems are interconnected and interdependent, and nobody is better placed to observe the changes and impacts from different practices and weather conditions than farmers in their ecosystems. Regular walks provide an unparalleled source of observational analysis and local knowledge. We know that it is farmers themselves who are best placed to make decisions on how to improve and augment the health of their soils. To make informed decisions, farmers need information. We need to learn from our land use and management practices and have the capacity to share the results of our decisions with one another. This meant we needed to understand the soil and realise how the choices we make in the management of our land can diminish or enhance this biodiversity. So Talamh Beo designed a project where farmers took an active role in building a better understanding of soil in all its complexity, especially below ground biological activity. Farmers designed the project, farmers implemented the project, and farmers are continuing with the journey after the project formally ends. From start to finish, the approach was, let us show you what we as farmers can do.
We chose 16 farms from across Ireland. The different farms reflect different ecosystems in different water catchment areas. We chose different land use practices: horticulture, tillage, hill grazing, pasture, poultry, orchards and dairy. We chose different soil types and conditions. Some were in poor condition from overgrazing or compaction, some are under conventional best practice, and some are regenerative or long-term organic. We put the project under a gender mainstreaming lens and ensured all our farmers were able to engage and participate equally, and that all roles on the farm were acknowledged and valued.
Participating farmers got to choose between two courses provided by leaders in the field. Nicole Masters Foundation and Masters class, and Elaine Ingham's Certified Lab Tech Programme. The 2-year CLP course included 63 lectures on the soil food web, making biocomplete compost, making liquid amendments from biocomplete compost and microscopy, as well as an 18-lecture permaculture course. Each participant also received a microscope with an 18 megapixel camera. Successful completion of the course leaves participants certified to biologically assess their soils, literally having a real-life biological laboratory in their fields.
Each participating farm chose a trial plot on their land. Chemical and biological soil samples were taken to create a baseline so we could quantify the impact of our amendments and innovations. We recognise that for most of our farms it will take more time than we have in our 1-year scope to see results, but we now have documented a starting point and we have measurable data to work with. We also conducted soil stability tests and soil health checks, including earthworm counts. We made above and below ground observations and we measured soil temperature. Based on these results, physical innovations were selected to assist with different issues, for example on compacted soils or soils depleted of organic matter. Maurice will show us here his termination of a cover crop.
Well, this is us terminating the cover crop. So these cover crops, they've got mustard that's shed all of its seeds, and some radishes. These guys have been feeding the ground, pumping nice exudates down into it and making the soil nice and friable, protecting it from compaction from the heavy rain over the winter.
Niall has put in multi-species swards and is looking at how to establish the swards in a manner which causes the least compaction.
Richard and Eleanor are long-time organic tillage farmers, now learning about the livestock beneath their feet and how to improve its health. Sinead and Mick concentrate on healthy, diverse organic fields to feed their micro-dairy cows.
Thomas is our fungi man. His experiment was to spread inoculated wood chips into his orchard to increase the fungal mass in his soils.
Breda and her father Sean decided to stop using artificial fertiliser in their trial area to see if this, together with treating their slurry with a biological agent that promotes aerobic decomposition, would have a beneficial effect on the biology in the field.
Conan chose a field that is severely compacted and has planted trees with roots that he inoculated with beneficial mycorrhizal fungi. Tree roots can go deeper, breaking through the compacted soil layers and improve the infiltration of water and oxygen.
Fergal Anderson chose a field which has been in horticulture production for 6 years. His experiment was to direct transplant pumpkins into cereal rye residues to reduce tillage and promote a better fungal bacterial balance.
Bridget concentrated on feeding the biodiversity in her trial field. She used composted sheep manure, hay mulch and nettle and comfrey teas.
Ger milks 180 dairy cows in West Cork. He chose a 6-acre mixed species test field. He reduced his chemical nitrogen application from 150 kilograms to 30 kilograms on this test plot and compared the tonnage of dry matter produced to what was produced on his control plot.
Fergal Smith trialled different spread rates of granulated lime to flocculate his clays. He is also using trees to introduce more air and break up his compacted soil.
Denise is perfecting making biocomplete compost and testing for success with her microscope.
Joanne is remediating a fruit garden planted up with fruit trees and soft fruit suffering from compaction. She hopes to use it as an example to others of how to fix poor compacted soil in marginal land.
Morris is experimenting with biologically inoculating seeds to kickstart the interaction between seed and soil. Matt built a Johnson Sioux bioreactor to create compost.
Mimi and Owen work a mixed farm, integrating multiple animal and plant species to feed each other and the soil.
Tommy concentrated on improving the fertility of the clay soil in a horticulture field using hay mulch and cover crops.
Physical innovations were trialled and documented by farmers, and their experiences were discussed and shared in 10 knowledge transfer group meetings and on farm walks. It was in the farm walks where the real learning and connections were made. Some sessions focused on learning how to use and getting practice with the microscopes. By this time next year, we should see a new batch of lab tech farmers certified and analysing their fields and making amendments in real time. Our farmers will host farm walks next year and continue to be lighthouse farmers, sharing their learnings from the trials and their knowledge and insight about soil.
Anyone wanting to follow the individual farmers' trials can go to Talamh Beo's website at talamhbeo.ie and look under the Soil EIP Project tab. We will leave you with Joanne and Milo to sum up the experience.
Hello there, Joanne and Milo here from Organic Gardens in northwest Donegal. We're delighted to be one of the lighthouse farms with the Talamh Beo EIP Biodiversity and Soil Literacy Programme. Here we grow our own food and educate our local community on using permaculture principles and the knowledge that we gain from our own education and experience. As we are passionate about our soil here, this course has allowed us to see firsthand the reasons why we need to protect our soils in today's current climate. It has given us a real insight as to what is possible around the country and to raise our awareness on biodiversity that we need to protect below our feet.
In starting this course, we have started to inoculate our soils with mycorrhizal fungi to improve our soil structure. This also has improved our biodiversity above and below ground.
We have also been learning about the correct ways to make a good biocomplete compost and to add the fertility back into our soil in a cyclical manner.
We have learned that the better our soil biodiversity is, the more nutritious and healthy our crops will be, and also the ecosystem in which our crops thrive in.
With the everyday pressures that the farming community faces, the knowledge that we have learnt on soil life and the opportunity to study with other farmers around the country is so valuable to us. Soil health is in dire need of our help, and no matter how small, for us to do nothing is no longer an option.
That was really interesting. Really interesting. Yeah. I think it sums up what has been said a lot this week in terms of it's all about the soil. So now we have 4 panellists up here from Talamh Beo. I'm going to ask you to briefly give us your names and whereabouts you're farming and what you're farming, and we'll dive into questions then. So Thomas, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm Thomas O'Connor. I own and run Manor Organic Farm in Kerry with my wife Claire. Our farm is in Glonagalt in Camp on the Dingle Peninsula, and our store is inside in Tralee. Our farm is 25 acres mixed. We have 5 acres as horticulture we supply into our shop. We have a 4-acre permaculture field, which is the orchards, which was our trial plot for this. We have a 4-acre agroforestry section. We planted 13 acres of native woodland. We bought the farm 15 years ago, and we're certified organic from day one, because for us that was the base foundation. No insecticides, herbicides, fungicides, all of that. So do no harm to nature at the start. And yeah, it's been fantastic. The EIP has been a fantastic learning experience.
And you're the funky man.
I'm a fun guy.
Next up.
My name is Breda Larkin. I farm my father in East Galway. It's the Upper Shannon catchment area in the water catchment. We've dry stock at the moment. We always growing up on the farm was always sheep and beef. But we just had beef over the last few years. So I suppose I'm in the generation gap, just learning as much as I can. I completed the agricultural green cert there just this year. And this EIP has been brilliant to work alongside it to see what's missing from the green cert. And so, yeah, that's it really, just learning as much as I can. I was part of the gender mainstreaming and the EIP project, just learning more about gender balance in agriculture and promoting women in agriculture, etc. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Great. I'm Bridget Murphy, and no more than everybody that's sitting up here and everybody on the project, it wasn't a sort of flippant comment when we said that we designed, managed and led this project as farmers. The filming that we just watched was done by one of our participants, and he pulled the video together. So I've been working on project managing this project, but I also farm a hill farm up in Sligo. Traditionally it was hill sheep, but I've been converting over to organic meadow seed and agroforestry and bees, and moving away from sheep. But yeah, it all goes back to whether you're on, you know, the mountain land, which is really, really boggy. It isn't even ready soil, but it starts off with understand your ecosystem, understand what you can produce from the ecosystem, and then work from there. So yeah, learning what we've learned from the Elaine Ingham course has been incredibly interesting. And we at the start of this really, really amazing adventure of putting it into practice as the years go down.
Yeah. Last but not least.
Yes, Richard Murphy of Robbins Lane. Now I farm with Ellen and my better half, and we've been on organic now since 2009. We've always in tillage. The soil was very degraded at that time when we took over, and we've not been importing anything. We only farmed manure for a little while, but then we gave up that because we felt as though we were importing chemicals onto our farm. So we tried different things like rock dust and different things like that, but nothing seems to be working, and our yields were going down very poorly.
How many acres of tillage?
About 80 hectares down in southeast. And excuse me. So say John Gersh, there was in a group then when John Gersh mentioned Elaine Ingham and all the rest of it, and that was a real light bulb moment for me. And we were really on our journey when Talamh Beo came along, and we're really delighted to go in with the EIP course, and we meet really similar farmers to ourselves.
And you could see that through the video, this kind of collaborative approach, and like you were saying, very farmer based. And if anyone has questions online, please do send them in. If anyone has questions from the floor, we'll come to those as well. Bridget, I just want to kind of establish for people who aren't familiar with kind of the nuts and bolts of the EIP. So how much funding were you awarded, and how long does it run for?
It's a one-year EIP, so they were under the 2021 call that Minister Hackett put out, 215,000. And what we did with that, as I say, is we took 16 farms through an education component, 10 knowledge transfer meetings, a farm walk on each of the 16 farms or a farm event, and what was the other component? Education, knowledge transfer, farm walks. I'm sure there's one that I'm missing at this stage, but yeah, there was this idea of peer-to-peer learning, I think, which we wanted to underpin the whole lot with.
I'm thinking of say Burn Bio, and I'm thinking of other EIPs as well, like the Bride Project, that was results based in terms of paying farmers for their work. Was this kind of results based in terms of the participation of the farmers?
No, and well, yes and no. Not so much on the results based of what was happening in the soil, because I think that all of us can understand that 1 year wasn't going to show much of that. What we did do was we paid farmers for their time sampling their fields and attending the knowledge transfer groups and that. But in terms of actual results off of the soil, that's going to come in the years that are to come.
Thomas, it sounds like that you had a lot of knowledge built up before this. So what did this year help you to advance on?
Personally, on the farm, it was pretty much a lot more of a focus on the stuff I should be doing, like building proper compost, the knowledge built up in the past, this really brought it into light, especially at the Elaine Ingham course, where like I always knew the ground was alive underneath me, but to turn around and have a microscope and to be able to take a sample and look down at it and actually personally get to know all the little creatures that were crawling around the place, and then understand what each of these creatures represented according to the health of the soil. So now I have a couple of windrows of seaweed and wood chips inoculated with garden giant mushrooms. I have about 4 Sue Johnson reactors going, and I plan to do a more biocomplete compost.
What's a Sue Johnson reactor? You better tell people.
Sue Johnson, well, he was talking earlier in the week. So it's essentially a cage, and it's a long 1-year composting process, and it builds up a larger diversity of biology inside in it, and you use that as a compost tea, whereas a shorter term compost wouldn't have much biological diversity. And then the soil food web focuses on biocomplete compost, and that's made in a shorter period of time, but it uses turning and bringing it up to a certain temperature so you can get rid of pathogens and getting rid of seeds. So they both have different roles to play. So if you have a lot of material like rushes and biomass coming off your fields, you could use that kind of system with a windrow turner and not worry about the seeds going out in the biomass again. Whereas with the Sue Johnson reactor, you're more likely to make a biologically diverse tea out of it and using that tea. So again, you're not worried about the actual seeds going out onto the ground.
And yeah, I think Knots are going to be doing a course on Sue Johnson as well, so it's going to be next.
Signed up for that.
So yeah, so better. Breda, for you, I mean, I think did you say you're the last generation or the generation?
Well, generation gap.
Yeah, you're in the generation gap. So what did the EIP give you in that case?
Yeah, so I mean, I would hoping to take over the farm eventually, to move into more and build up the business on the farm, because we were dry stock. We know it's kind of conventional farming is difficult to make a living, really. So, but the biological farm conference, I've been interested the last few years, and so this project was brilliant to actually get stuck in, because I suppose I want to work with my father to learn how to do it biologically, so I can lower inputs and therefore turn a profit. And because we're pasture, like we grow grass and make silage, so we tested the silage field, the one that was used for silage constantly. So we, it's great to learn there's good organic matter in the soil. In fact, it'd probably be good to grow tillage, and people don't know in East Galway, they don't see tillage as much, but actually potentially there's good tillage. You could grow your own straw. It opens up
avenues and
exactly.
Your mind. Yeah. Are there any questions from the floor? Does anyone have any? I think we have a question from Sean over there. Sean, do you have a question? Or we have a question from online as well. So the online question is, do any of you grow your own mycorrhizal fungi on your own farms, or do you import them?
So I don't grow mycorrhizal fungi, but I think the Soil Association of the UK have done a lot of research for farmers if they want to grow specifically mycorrhizal fungi. What I do is I use the garden giant, which is a primary digester, and that kick-started the biological process of digesting the wood chips. So in areas where I had no mushrooms and I put out the wood chips and I inoculated them with the garden giant, that started the breakdown process, and now I could have 14 or 15 different varieties of mushrooms throughout the system. So I started just by creating the system and then turn around and build the environment and they will come, and then feeding the feedstock. Like inside my orchard, I've chipped a lot of the willow and stuff, and that's what I wanted to do, is shift it from a bacterial to a fungally dominated area. And the orchard's planted about 15 years, but it stayed almost like a ryegrass field. But what I was missing was the carbon, so I started adding the wood chip to it and then inoculating the garden giant, and then as that started to break down, and even within the year I can go out now and I can pull back the grass, there's about that much wood chip, and the amount of little insects and life that you can see on top of that. But even seeing that lets me know what's happening underground. But there are places you can buy in inoculants and stuff like that, but you're better off trying to create the environment and put the feedstock into the environment in order for your own mushrooms within the locality, because the spores last for years inside the soil.
Do we have a question from the floor there?
Yeah, well, it's as much an observation as anything else, but first of all, I want to say absolutely brilliant video. It looked brilliant. I thought, the previous speakers talked about the regenerative and or organic, but you've managed to bring all components of farmers together in one thing, working collaboratively. So that's really, really good. I'm intrigued to see, I know it's only a year and it's tough to get any huge results in that short time to see. Have you seen any change since you've started in your practices? Is there? And then there was one other question. In the video it mentioned terminating the cover crop. Actually, how did that get terminated? Because it's a discussion that's been rolling here for the last week, and any approaches are always welcome.
Who wants to take that?
I suppose Morris did was it a crimper he used?
Yeah.
Yeah, he used the crimper
during
to
the frost.
terminate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he would have been working on that kind of project. Yeah. I suppose the biggest learning from the project was, so results, yes, I can see the results in the quality of compost I'm handling myself from on the farm, but I think the biggest result is you see in the farmers themselves, and the way their attitudes have changed, how we understand the commonality, the importance of the soil, how we got to understand more of what's happening under the ground, and then also having the tools. So for me, again, one of the biggest things was having the tools like the microscope and the Brix meter. Yes, they're tools, we need tools, but we can use those tools to retrain our senses. So as we use the tools and we get used to the smells and the touch of the soil and what is healthy, in time we don't necessarily need those tools as we did.
Richard, did you find that?
I suppose we did the Nicole Masters course now. She's a very practical woman, and what we found on our farm is that by inoculating seed now was fungal. Anything we reckon my stab at being inoculating the seed with anything fungal I can get on the farm. And we undersowed the crop then this year, then all our grain crops with chicory and clover, red clover. And just to give an example, like the trial plot now we had this year now was the highest and driest part of our farm. And I went up there now just before harvest and to look at the barley and the peas now, and the chicory and the clover was almost up to the head of the barley. And put my hand down into the soil and it was moist. And it was soft as well. And I was able to bring up a handful of soil and there was a worm in it. And I said, I didn't do it again because the chance of that happening again would be very slim. But it just gives an example of the biology and how resilient biology is if you can look after and trust in nature, basically. That I think that's all we need to do is just trust in nature, really.
And I mean, the sense that I get from all of you and the sense that I get from the video is it was an overwhelmingly positive experience. And Bridget, for you, project managing this, long term, I know you were saying that long term, it's going to be needed, time is needed to kind of quantify the true results. But is there space for this EIP to continue long term if it did potentially get funding?
You know, we did consider that, and obviously the topic opens itself up to extending it out. But we felt that we've explored the tip of an iceberg, and what we wanted to do was, instead of diving deeper into it ourselves, we wanted to open it up as much as possible to other farmers. So instead of 16 farmers spending another 5 years really getting to grips with it, we wanted to take that 1 year message out saying, once you get bitten by the soil bug, it's amazing. It does, as Thomas says, it changes you. Yeah. And we wanted to share that with as many farmers as possible. So actually what we'd really like to see is, say, for example, under the new CAP, for discussions to happen around a possible soil project around the environmental schemes, or, just something where it could actually roll out much further to way more farmers. And everybody doesn't have to have a microscope or a long course, but how to make your compost. How to, as Richard said, I mean, what I did on my farm was my farm was historically overgrazed, and I allowed my full meadows to come up and then cut them and put them straight back into the soil. That idea of feeding the soil and getting the soil really, really full, and then the life would come back into it. That type of stuff, as I say, it just becomes more important to share it out with more farmers than to try and extend it just for ourselves.
And it's interesting in the context of kind of you're all in different regions on different types of farms and sheep. We have another question. I saw the microphone was handed to a lady down there.
Hi, how are you? I'm Denise Jones, and I'm actually one of the 16 farms as part of the CIP. And just a couple of things that I wanted to say is that I think with the Lane Ingham's course, ultimately what you come to is an understanding that firstly, if you do the CLP and you qualify, you are certified to biologically assess soil samples that you take in. And what that actually tells you is where your soil currently sits in the successional chart. And the fungal to bacteria ratio is a key component in that. And once you have that baseline, that then you know where to go in terms of what you need to do to drive your soil on to be more productive. And Currently, once everybody on this course qualifies, there'll be about 13 qualified CLPs able to do those soil analysis. But currently there is one qualified CLP in Ireland, and it's James Buckley in BioSoil Ireland, if anybody wants to start this process. And in answer to somebody asked about mycorrhizal fungi, if you have undisturbed hedgerows or woodland on your ground, you will get mycorrhizal fungi there. You'll just, if you peel it back, and you can use that as an inoculum. But all in all, it's been a fantastic experience.
Yeah, and that is the kind of the feeling that comes from it. Thomas, did you want to make a point there?
Just on the results, even though it is a 1-year EIP, and one of the things we learned from this was that 1 year isn't really long enough by the time you get started and you do your 16 farm work, so it should be 2 or 3 years. So even though the EIP was only 1 year, the farmers on it will be working with that. So throughout the 1 year, we got all our soil tests done. That's a baseline for us. We've all implemented different projects on the farm to see how it could affect it. But we'll come back and we'll continue learning off each other. So over the next 2 or 3 years, what we hope started out as lighthouse farms for the EIP will become hedge school farms for Talamh Beo.
And
exactly, because I suppose, you know, Lane Ingham teaches you that weeds tell you a story. So like docks, that's always a problem with that. But that's compaction, and so we did things where, you know, I'm going to move the cattle more. There's a lot more compaction where they were going down to the trot to have water and stuff. So you can really start to, you know, dig a hole here and there. You start to just be more excited about, you know, you can really see, even with the, just simply digging a hole, you'll see the colour and even the compaction, you can see it all if you start to.
Were you more excited to go to your agricultural course with, say, your agricultural college, or were you more excited to take part in the EIP?
Oh, I think the EIP for sure. I mean, we did learn the soil food web came up, but we didn't do much about it. I was excited, then nothing happened to it. So, you know,
yeah.
It's definitely a component could be added, because it would excite people more about trying to, especially making compost. That's kind of the foundation, just make compost well and then build from there. Even farm urbanure can be more efficient.
And I know there is a hunger kind of nationwide in terms of, you know, what is going on in the soil, and we talked about microbes yesterday. Do you guys have a website where that people could visit? Thomas, what would that be?
Talamhbeo.ie.
So very simple.
Yeah. And we have a hedge school on there, and we have a tab specifically around the EIP where you can see the results of each of the farmers and you can see their profiles. But then we also have other stuff on there like local food policies, inputs on CAP, all this kind of things. So again, we're about building food sovereignty. In order to be able to do that in resilient, sustainable communities, we need to make sure the ground is good and healthy. Because I always tell people I became a farmer because I wanted to be a better Kerry man. The only way to do that is by eating literally the ground in Kerry. You are what you eat. So by us consuming and being part of our landscape and having local close food systems, then that's how we build food sovereignty.
Talamh Beo, everyone. That's it from Talamh Beo, and like Thomas mentioned, you can visit their website if you like. Next up, we are going to have Chris Trump talking about Korean natural farming, but for now we're going to take a short break.